Hello everyone. Although my channel is devoted to radio communication and radio communication equipment in general, I pay a lot of attention to radio amateur and radio amateur equipment. And in this video I will tell you about the Yaesu FTdx10 radio amateur shortwave transceiver. The Yaesu FTdx10 is a modern shortwave transceiver designed especially for radio amateurs. Its operating frequency range in the receive mode is from 30 kHz to 75 MHz in all types of modulation. In the transmission mode, only the amateur bands with the ability to be open. FTdx10 is a stationary desktop transceiver, but its power supply is not 220 volts, from 12 volts, or rather 13.8 volts, so nothing prevents it from being taken out into the fields and used there from a rechargeable battery. True, its consumption is quite large. In the reception mode it consumes about 2 and a little amperes. It is made according to the hybrid SDR architecture. What does it mean? This means that in practice it allows you to combine the advantages of SDR with direct sampling and SDR with frequency conversion, that is, with an intermediate frequency. SDR with direct sampling allows us to observe any frequency band on a panoramic indicator, on a waterfall, and SDR with an intermediate frequency allows us to have very high characteristics in terms of dynamic range and selectivity. This transceiver combines both, that is, in fact, we can say that it has two receiving paths. One is designed specifically to display a panorama, a spectrogram, a waterfall, and this receiving path operates in SDR mode with direct digitization, and the second receiving path is designed for acoustic reception of a signal by a person, and this receiving path is built using SDR technology with frequency conversion, with an intermediate frequency. Most modern models of SDR transceivers from different manufacturers are made either with digitization of a wide frequency band or according to a super heterodyne scheme using narrowband hardware filters, roofing filters, and this transceiver, unlike most others, combines both. The first intermediate frequency is low, and is equal to 9 MHz. A roofing filter is installed at this intermediate frequency. Roofing filters are switched for different modes of operation in this transceiver. There are standard roofing filters with bandwidths of 500 Hz, 3 kHz and 12 kHz. As you can guess, respectively, for telegraph, for single sideband modulation and for amplitude and frequency modulations. But an additional optional 300 Hz roofing filter can also be installed. Despite the presence of such narrowband hardware roofing filters, the receiver bandwidth of this transceiver is smoothly adjustable, since it is naturally provided by SDR technologies. For example, in the single sideband modulation mode, this transceiver does not have any switching, narrow and wide bandwidth, but you can adjust the bandwidth smoothly from the minimum possible several hundred Hz to the maximum possible 4 kHz. The transmitter output power of this transceiver in shortwave bands and in the range of 50 MHz in SSB, CW and FM modes, like most other HF transceivers, is 100 watts. But also the transceiver can still operate in the 70 MHz band in modifications intended for those countries where this range is permitted. And in this band, its output power is less, and is equal to 50 watts. There is a built-in antenna tuner in the transceiver, built on a relay, switching capacitance and inductance. This tuner is designed to adjust the VSWR of antennas with low VSWR up to 3.0. That is, this is not a tuner, designed to tune any piece of wire in the fields at any frequency, but this is a tuner designed to adjust not high SWR values. As you can see, the transceiver has a color graphic display. Display resolution 800 by 480 pixels. Also, the display allows you to work in touchscreen mode, which is very convenient. You can tune the transceiver in frequency simply by touching the spectrogram to the waterfall, moving the tuning pointer to the desired place of interest. And all other menu functions are also controlled via the touchscreen. An external computer monitor can be connected to the transceiver using the DVI interface. In this case, the resolution can be 800 by 600 pixels. Also, a USB keyboard and a USB mouse can be connected to the transceiver. The mouse is very convenient to use during normal operation of the transceiver. Instead of a touchscreen, all functions can be performed using the mouse. The mouse cursor is visible on the screen. The keyboard is convenient for working with CW, TTY, PSK, decoders and encoders of which are built into this transceiver.
Я слышал, что у вас усилитель включен. Я на голый трансцивер работаю. А трансцивер простенький, FTdx10 HF SDR.
Для знакомства все-таки поделимся информацией о технике.
Центр Борис.
QSL 159, спасибо.
Oscar November 5, Whiskey, Quebec. Oscar November 5, Whiskey, Quebec. Thank you, Oscar November 5, Whiskey Queen. You are also 5973.
Since the transceiver is stationary, there are many buttons and various controls on the front panel. Most of the most useful functions are available immediately without having to search for them in the menu. The main control is a knob. This transceiver has a dual knob. In fact, these are two rotary encoders located on the same axis. They are designed to change the frequency with different steps. For example, the main rotary encoder can change the frequency in 10 Hz, 1 Hz steps, and the larger rotary encoder can change the frequency in steps of, for example, 100 Hz or 10 kHz, or even units of MHz. The transceiver screen has a panoramic indicator that can operate in many different modes. Of course, it displays a normal spectrogram. Of course, it displays a waterfall. The ratio of the sizes of the waterfall and the spectrogram can be adjusted by the user. You can also turn off the indication of various additional functions and capabilities of the transceiver on the screen, and then their place will be taken by the extended panoramic indicator. Moreover, this panoramic indicator can work in 3D mode. There are two different modes of operation of the panoramic indicator during frequency tuning of the transceiver. One mode is when the center frequency is always the tuning frequency of the transceiver. When we turn the knob of the rotary encoder, the frequency of the transceiver's tuning changes and all the readings on the panorama, the waterfall, are shifted. And another mode is when the panorama and the waterfall are always in place, and when moving along the frequency, the pointer moves along this spectrogram, along the waterfall. It all looks as if the tuning arrow on an old receiver is moving. In my opinion, this mode is very convenient. I mainly use this mode, panorama bandwidth from 1 kHz to 1 MHz. Of course, the sensitivity of the panorama, the scrolling speed of the waterfall, the colors of the waterfall, all this is customizable by the user. Now let's hear how the signal of this transceiver sounds on the air. I will use it to transmit in single sideband modulation on the 80 meters band, and this signal will be received by a web SDR receiver located a few hundred kilometers from me. Here from his page is now open on my monitor. And in the video, you will hear the sound recorded from this web SDR receiver.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, проверка трансцивера Yaesu FTdx10. Здесь радио Анна 3, Тамара, Леонид, Борис, всем прием.
Since the formation of a signal for transmission in this transceiver also occurs using SDR technology, there are many user settings that affect the formation of this very signal. There is an adjustment of the bandwidth that the signal of this transceiver will occupy on the air. Of course, there is a microphone equalizer. It has 3 bands. But not just 3 bands, low frequencies, middle and high, but the center frequency of each of these bands is set by the user directly in Hertz. The bandwidth is also set. and naturally the rise or fall by a certain amount of decibels. Of course, there is a microphone gain control. Of course, there are microphones, a compressor called a processor, and there is also an automatic microphone gain control mode. On the air through the web SDR receiver, we now heard the signal of this transceiver not the same as it is by default with the factory settings, but I still adjusted it a little, at least applied a microphone equalizer and turned on the compressor. The transceiver is equipped with an SSM75E microphone. This is an electret microphone. The FTdx10 transceiver is equipped with the same microphone. The microphone has, in addition to 2 buttons up and down, which allow you to change the frequency or change the channel number, there are 4 programmable buttons, the functions of which can be assigned by the user. And there is a mute button. As for the mute button, I would like to say separately that this is, in my opinion, a very necessary, very important function. Thank you so much Yaesu for that they added such a button to their microphones. This button allows you to instantly mute the receiver. Since we are always working on the air, we hold a microphone in our hand. Then in the case when we wanted to hear something from the environment, we can instantly press this button, and the sound will disappear. Look. I hear the sound of the ether noise now. I press this button, and the sound disappears. How is it convenient? The fact that, for example, in stationary conditions I work on the air, listen to something, someone came up to me to say something, or I heard that the phone or intercom is ringing in the next room, and I can press this button very quickly without knocking down the set volume level on the transceiver, without reaching out to it at all, without turning any knobs. I was holding a microphone in my hands, and I just pressed one button, and the sound disappeared immediately, silence, and I listened to what is happening around me. It is even more convenient in the fields. There you constantly listen to what is happening around you, who approaches you, what sounds in the forest. Moreover, it is very convenient to have such a button. There is such a button. It's just on my own behalf. I expressed my attitude to the presence of this button. I think that not everyone needs her as much as I do. But for me this is a very handy feature. Almost all shortwave transceivers of the last 20 years of production from Yaesu were equipped with an NH31 microphone, and since FTdx101D, and, accordingly, FTdx10, are already equipped with SSM75 microphones. A more modern, more comfortable microphone.
Les représentants des services d'ambulance à travers le pays constatent une croissance inquiétante des appels.
Esni a történetekben. Pedig Juhász Ferenc vers
یوازې په یو کال کې د اوریدونکو لخوا
Gina Bear Bonk and
Malkovich for Magic.
The transceiver sounds good enough on the built-in loudspeaker. Of course, it would be more pleasant to listen to an external loudspeaker, but it sounds very good on the built-in one. The body of the transceiver is large, the loudspeaker is also large enough, of high quality, so the sound is quite acceptable even from the built-in loudspeaker. By the way, the weight of the transceiver is a little less than 6 kilograms. At the receiver input, the preamplifiers and attenuators are controlled in this transceiver as follows. There are 2 modes of preamplifier operation, preamplifier 1 and preamplifier 2. They differ in gain. Naturally, there is a preamplifier off mode, as in all Yaesu transceivers. This mode is called IPO, and there is an attenuator included in 3 positions, with various attenuation. In addition to the microphone and headphone jacks on the front panel, there are as many as 14 connectors, then so many unprotected connectors, it would be very bad. But the transceiver is desktop, and therefore a large number of connectors means a lot of possibilities for connecting various external devices. There is only one antenna connector, and this is of course SO239. Next to it is a 6-pin mini DIN connector, on which the low-frequency signal from the receiver, the signal for switching the transceiver to transmit, the low-frequency signal for modulation, and so on are output. This connector is common on most Yaesu transceivers. Another Minidin connector for connecting an external antenna tuner and a DB9 connector for controlling the transceiver via the CAT interface. The pinout of this connector is the same as for DTE devices, if you still remember what it is, that is, like a computer, and not like modems or some other control equipment. Of course, there is also a connector for connecting a 12 volts power supply, a 3.5mm jack for connecting an external speaker, another mini DIN connector for connecting a power amplifier, and a 3.5mm connector for connecting a control panel with buttons. USB Type-B connectors, when connected to a computer, creates a virtual COM port for the CAT interface, and a sound card for receiving and transmitting sound. Two Type A USB connectors are for a mouse and keyboard, and next to them is a DVI connector for an external monitor.
РФ-2 радио, РА-3, Дима Щукуля.
Добрый день.
Кто?
Я и курить хочу. Я там курей выпустил, чтоб травку посадить.
Ромка, Рамиль, возьмите, спасибо, прием.
Без проблем, все нормально. Спасибо. Здоровья на тазду пожелаю. Но если ко мне вопрос...
Принял, Александр. Вот было Киршо, вижу,
Лог показал.
Придется или отрабатывать, или объяснить, написать, чтобы директор не наказал.
Защелки понащелкивал, и антенны попеределывал туда.
The work with the memory card is done very well in this transceiver. All the necessary features are there. You can save all the transceiver settings to a file on a memory card, respectively, then you can read these settings. For example, you can have several files, several options for setting the transceiver for work in different conditions, for stationary work, for work in the fields, for work in competitions, if you work in them. You can also save a table with memory cells in a separate file. There are 100 memory locations in this transceiver, not so many. You can accordingly have several such files with different frequency values for different situations, in order to listen to some interesting signals, in order to listen to broadcasts, or something else. In general, the same handy function. Well, the most important function is recording sound to files on a memory card. Digitizing parameters 16 kHz 16-bit. In my opinion, it is quite enough to record qualitatively everything that a shortwave receiver can hear. Uncompressed file format.
Первый раз, когда отвечал, я не последний раз, когда говорил «до свидания, Абдулет».
Прием.
Меняется сила сигнала, я говорю, с разных сторон. Первый раз, когда отвечал, я не последний раз, когда говорил «до свидания, Абдулет». С востока громко слышно.
Also, short sound files are recorded in the files on the memory card, which can be recorded directly from the microphone of this transceiver in order to play them later on the air, for example, a voice call signal, or information about your station. In order not to say the same thing every time on the air, you can write it all down to a file. Many transceivers have this feature. But here all this is recorded on a memory card, so you can have several sets in such files for different situations.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, проверка записи.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, check the recording.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, проверка записи.
You can also write a screenshot to the memory card, that is, dump the entire contents of the screen at any time when there is a spectrogram waterfall. When some parameters in the menu are open, we can write all this to a file. File names, by the way, and sound recordings and screenshots are all very handy. They contain date and time, so it's easy to find them later. For example, you can send such a file with a screenshot to someone over the internet and show something. There are many more different functions and capabilities in the transceiver. Of course, there is a notch filter. There is a noise reduction system, which, by the way, works very well, and with a weak signal level, with poor intelligibility, it really increases this intelligibility significantly. There is an equalizer for reception, which is configured separately for different modes, for single band, for amplitude modulation, for frequency. Allows you to customize the tone of the reception, which is pleasant for you, with your loudspeaker. There are decoders for different signals PSK, telegraph, RTTY. Of course there is a contour function, which is now available in almost all Yaesu transceivers. It also makes the sound more enjoyable, and many more, many different features, functions, settings. The user interface, in my opinion, is very user-friendly and very beautiful. But this is not the most important thing. The most important thing, of course, is the quality of the receiver. The receiver works just fine, the dynamic range is high, and there is very little intrinsic noise. If this transceiver had only a convenient user interface, it would be so little, let's say. You know examples of transceivers with a good interface but a bad receiver. I can't say that about this transceiver. First of all, of course, there is an excellent receiver here. Unfortunately, in our time on air on short waves in settlements there is a very high level of noise and interference, and this transceiver is stationary. It is not very convenient to take it out to the fields, it consumes a lot. But, of course, I would like to take it out into the fields and listen to the broadcast on it precisely in the absence of urban interference and noise. If I do, I will show you in a separate video, but for now that's all for now. Thank you for watching this video. Use various transceivers, radios, work on the air, watch my videos, subscribe to the channel, to the V-Contacta group, to Facebook. Alexei Iganin was here. Bye everyone.
Смотрю новый диапазон, Коля. Спасибо. До 9 баллов.
Новосибирск, местная передача.